It all started on an otherwise ordinary Wednesday afternoon when I found myself wandering aimlessly through the back alleys of our small college town. The wind was sharp, whipping around corners with the kind of bite that makes you clutch your coat tighter. I was deep in thought, contemplating the usual existential nonsense, what I wanted to do with my life, who I wanted to be. And then I heard it, a clattering, followed by a muffled curse. I turned a corner and stumbled upon a peculiar sight, a woman in a white lab coat kneeling beside a pile of scattered machinery. She had wild, frizzy hair that seemed to defy gravity and a pair of oversized goggles perched atop her head. "Ah, you there," she exclaimed, pointing a wrench at me like it was some kind of weapon. "You look like you've got a steady hand. Care to help an old genius with her latest inventions?" "Old genius?" I echoed, raising an eyebrow. "That's quite the introduction." She laughed, the sound a mix of delight and madness. "Dr. Veronica Castellan at your service." "And you are?" Nathan," I replied hesitantly. "What exactly are you working on?" She beamed, gesturing to the hodgepodge of wires, circuits, and glowing blue tubes scattered at her feet. "Only the most revolutionary time machine of the century. Well, technically it's the first of its kind, so it's already the best by default. A time machine," I repeated, skepticism dripping from my tone. Yes, I know. Everyone's a critic until it works." She stood, brushing dirt from her lab coat. "But I could use an assistant, someone willing to test the boundaries of science and destiny. How about it?" I hesitated. On one hand, she seemed completely unhinged. On the other, she had a magnetic energy about her, an irresistible charm that made you want to believe in the impossible. Besides, what did I have to lose? "All right," I said, surprising even myself. "What's the plan?" The laboratory was a chaotic mix of brilliance and madness. Tools dangled precariously from hooks. Blueprints were pinned to every available surface, annotated with frantic scribbles. At the center of it all was a machine that looked like it had been ripped straight out of a steampunk fever dream. Bronze plating, gears that spun for no apparent reason, and a control panel covered in buttons and dials. "Now, Nathan," Dr. Castellan began, adjusting her goggles, "I have a theory. The past isn't just a sequence of events. It's malleable like clay. With the right nudge, we can shape it into something new. And you, my dear boy, are about to become my first subject." "Subject?" I repeated, suddenly uneasy. "What kind of nudge are we talking about?" Her eyes gleamed with excitement. "You said you've always felt like something was missing, yes? That you don't quite fit in this version of yourself." I blinked, taken aback. "How did you?" "Please, darling, I'm a scientist, not a mind reader," she interrupted. "It's written all over your face. Lucky for you, I've devised a way to fix that. Imagine going back in time, not just to relive the past, but to rewrite it. To become the person you've always felt you were meant to be." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. For as long as I could remember, I'd felt out of place in my own skin. There was a part of me, hidden, suppressed, that yearned for something more, something different. I never dared to articulate it, let alone act on it. And now here was this eccentric scientist offering me the chance to do exactly that. "What's the catch?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She grinned, her expression equal parts mischievous and kind. "The catch is that it's a one-way ticket. If we succeed, you'll wake up in a version of the past where you were always, well, let's say, a more authentic version of yourself. But there's no guarantee it'll work perfectly, and there's no coming back." I hesitated, the weight of her words sinking in. Was I really ready to leave everything behind? To step into the unknown for the chance to finally feel whole? "Let's do it," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Dr. Castellan clapped her hands together. "Marvelous. Let's get started." The process was both terrifying and exhilarating. I stood inside the machine, a sleek helmet strapped to my head while Dr. Castellan tinkered with the controls. The room buzzed with energy, the air crackling with anticipation. "Now," she said, her voice unusually serious, "think about who you want to be. Visualize it. Feel it in your bones. The machine will do the rest." I closed my eyes, my mind racing. I picture myself as a girl, not just physically, but in every sense of the word. I imagine a childhood where I wore dresses instead of hand-me-down jeans, where my reflection in the mirror felt like home instead of a stranger. I pictured a life where I could finally be me. "Readies?" Dr. Castellan asked. "Ready," I replied, my heart pounding. She flipped a switch, and the world dissolved into light. When I opened my eyes, everything felt different. The room around me was familiar, yet subtly altered, like a dream that almost made sense. My body felt lighter, more fluid. I looked down and froze. Gone were the baggy clothes and angular frame I'd always known. Instead, I saw a delicate hand, slender wrists, and curves where there had been none before. I stumbled toward a mirror and gasped. Staring back at me was a girl. No, a young woman, with wide eyes, soft features, and long, wavy hair. She looked like me, but not me, like a version of myself I'd only ever dared to dream about. "Welcome back," Dr. Castellan said from behind me, her voice brimming with pride. "How does it feel?" I turned to her, tears streaming down my face. "It feels right." Adjusting to my new reality was both exhilarating and surreal. The world had changed to accommodate my new identity. My name was now Natalie. My childhood memories were filled with tea parties and ballet lessons, and my wardrobe was a treasure trove of feminine delights. But the strangest part was how natural it all felt, as if this had always been my life. And yet, there were moments of dissonance, cracks in the veneer of this rewritten past. Friends would occasionally hesitate, their eyes flickering with confusion before they carried on as if nothing was amiss. My parents seemed the same, yet there was a distance in their smiles that hadn't been there before. Dr. Castellan warned me this might happen. "The universe is a stubborn thing," she explained. "It doesn't like being rewritten. Some inconsistencies are inevitable." Despite the oddities, I felt more at home in my skin than I ever had. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving, I was living. Months passed, and I began to carve out a new life for myself. I joined a local theater group, made friends who accepted me for who I was, and even started dating a sweet, shy boy named Ethan who treated me like I was the only girl in the world. But the more I settled into my new life, the more I began to question the cost of what I'd done. Was it fair to rewrite the past, to alter the lives of everyone around me without their consent? Had I truly found myself, or had I simply created an illusion? These questions gnawed at me, growing louder with each passing day. I found myself returning to Dr. Castellan's lab, seeking her guidance. "Regrets?" she asked one evening, as we sat amidst the chaos of her inventions. "Not exactly," I replied. "But I can't help wondering, was this the right thing to do?" She studied me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "There's no such thing as a perfect decision, Natalie. The question isn't whether this was right or wrong. It's whether it's what you truly wanted." I thought about that for a long time. About the life I'd left behind and the life I'd gained. About the person I was and the person I had become. And in the end, I realized something profound. Life is messy, full of mistakes and second chances. But for the first time, I wasn't running from myself. I was embracing who I was meant to be. And that, I decided, was enough. As time went on, I began to notice more peculiarities in my new reality. Some were subtle, like an old photo on my parents' mantle where I was clearly standing in a boy's tuxedo, though the rest of the image now portrayed me in a pastel dress. Others were more unsettling. A childhood friend, Sarah, once called me by my old name in a moment of distraction, only to laugh it off with an uneasy, "I don't know why I said that." I didn't blame Sarah or anyone else for these lapses. How could I? The universe had bent and twisted itself to accommodate my new truth, but it hadn't done so perfectly. These glitches were a reminder that the past wasn't as malleable as Dr. Castellan had promised. Still, the joy of living as Natalie far outweighed these eerie moments. I threw myself into this life, savoring every aspect of being a woman in ways I'd only dreamed of. There were the mundane joys, shopping for clothes that actually fit my style, experimenting with makeup, and the soft clack of my heels on pavement. But there were also deeper moments of fulfillment. I felt like I could finally connect with people in an authentic way. I was no longer hiding, no longer pretending. Ethan was a huge part of that. Our relationship blossomed into something I'd never experienced before. He was attentive, kind, and genuinely adored me. On our dates, he'd hold doors open, pull out chairs, and look at me with a tenderness that made my heart ache. I'd never felt so seen. But as beautiful as it all was, the cracks in my new reality continued to widen. One evening, as I was helping my mom set the table for dinner, she said something that stopped me cold. "You know, it's funny," she began, placing a stack of plates on the counter. "The other day, your father found an old box of your baby clothes. It had some of your brother's things mixed in. I swear, for a second, I could have sworn I remembered you wearing that little blue onesie." My hands froze mid-reach for the silverware. "Oh, that's odd," I replied, forcing a smile. She nodded, oblivious to my discomfort. Probably just my memory playing tricks on me. Getting old is no picnic, I'll tell you that. I laughed weakly, but the unease lingered long after the conversation ended. If my mother's memories were starting to falter, how long before others began noticing inconsistencies? How long before this carefully crafted reality began to unravel? The answer came sooner than I expected. One afternoon, I stopped by Dr. Castellan's lab unannounced. I needed answers about the glitches, about the strange looks from old friends, about the growing sense that this new life wasn't as stable as I'd hoped. I found her hunched over a cluttered workbench, muttering to herself as she adjusted a strange, glowing device. When she saw me, her face lit up with a grin. "Natalie, my favorite test subject. What brings you here? I need to talk," I said, my voice trembling. "About everything." She put down her tools and gestured for me to sit. "I figured you might." Spill. Taking a deep breath, I told her everything. The glitches in people's memories, the strange moments of dissonance, the gnawing fear that my new life was built on a shaky foundation. Dr. Castellan listened intently, her expression growing more serious with each word. When I finished, she let out a long sigh. "I was afraid of this," she admitted. "What do you mean?" I asked, my heart sinking. "The universe is more resilient than I anticipated," she said, rubbing her temples. "When we rewrote your past, we essentially forced reality to accommodate a paradox. It worked, but the strain is starting to show." "Strain?" I echoed, panic rising in my chest. "What does that mean for me? For this life?" She hesitated. "It means the glitches will likely get worse. Memories may shift, people may start to notice inconsistencies, and eventually, well, the timeline could collapse entirely." Collapse. The word hung in the air like a death knell. "So what do I do?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Can we fix it?" Dr. Castellan leaned back in her chair, her gaze thoughtful. "There's one potential solution, but you're not going to like it." "Tell me." She sighed again, then pointed to the time machine in the corner of the lab. "We could send you back to the moment we changed everything. You'd have to choose between undoing the rewrite or finding a way to reinforce it. Either way, it's risky." The thought of going back filled me with dread. This life, imperfect as it was, felt like home. I didn't want to lose it. But the alternative, letting the timeline crumble, was unthinkable. What happens if the timeline collapses? I asked, dreading the answer. "It's hard to say," she admitted. "Worst case? You and everyone around you could cease to exist as the paradox unravels. Best case? The universe reverts to the original timeline and you become Nathan again." The room spun around me. I clutched the edge of the workbench, trying to steady myself. "Take your time," Dr. Castellan said gently. "This isn't a decision to rush." That night, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. My mind was a storm of conflicting emotions. I'd fought so hard to embrace who I truly was, to build a life that felt real and right. But now, that life was slipping through my fingers. Ethan's face flashed in my mind, his shy smile, The way he held my hand like it was the most natural thing in the world. My parents' cautious yet genuine acceptance of me as their daughter. My friends, my passions, my dreams. Could I really risk losing all of it? But then I thought about the cracks, the glitches, the growing sense of unease. I couldn't ignore the signs. Something had to be done. By morning, I'd made my decision. "Are you sure about this?" Dr. Castellan asked as she secured the helmet to my head. "No," I admitted. "But I don't think I have a choice." She nodded, her expression somber. "All right. Remember, when you get back to the past, you'll have a small window of time to decide what to do. If you want to undo the rewrite, just flip the lever on the left console. If you want to reinforce it, you'll need to stabilize the timeline by convincing my past self to embrace being Natalie," I finished for her. We'd gone over the plan a dozen times, but it still felt like a leap of faith.
"Exactly," she said.
"Good luck, Natalie. You're braver than you realize." I closed my eyes as she flipped the switch. The world dissolved into light once more. When I opened my eyes, I was standing in the lab, Dr. Castellan's lab, but different. The walls were bare, the workbench clutter-free. It was the version of her lab from the day we first met. And there I was, standing in the corner, staring at Dr. Castellan as she gestured excitedly at the half-assembled time machine. I looked so different, awkward, uncertain, and unmistakably Nathan. For a moment, I froze. Seeing my old self was like staring into a mirror that reflected a stranger. But I didn't have time to dwell on the surrealism of it. The clock was ticking. Taking a deep breath, I stepped forward. "Nathan," I called out. I turned to face me, eyes widening in confusion. "Who are you?" "I'm someone who's been where you are," I said carefully. "Someone who knows what you're feeling, even if you can't put it into words yet." Nathan frowned, but there was a flicker of recognition in his eyes. "I don't understand." "You don't have to," I said gently. "Not yet, but you will. And when you do, I want you to know it's okay to be scared. It's okay to not have all the answers. Just promise me one thing."
"What?"
"Promise me you'll listen to your heart. No matter what anyone else says, no matter how hard it gets, trust yourself. You deserve to be happy." Nathan stared at me, a mixture of confusion and hope playing across his face. Slowly, he nodded. "I promise." A warmth spread through me, like the first rays of sunlight breaking through a storm. I turned to the machine, ready to flip the lever that would stabilize the timeline. As I did, a sense of peace washed over me. No matter what happened next, I knew I'd made the right choice. And for the first time in my life, I felt whole. Thank you so much for watching till now. It means the world to have you here. This community is all about empowering each other and celebrating the incredible journeys of everyone on their path to living authentically. If you're ever feeling lost or alone, remember you have a whole family here for you. Hit that subscribe button, smash that like button, and let's keep inspiring each other, sending you all the love and strength in the world. Until next time, live your life by your rules.